5 books every humorist should read, and why they're actually bad. How's that for a 2013 BuzzFeed headline? Now, this channel's previous videos have all been quite low-key analyses of fencing footage, but all that's about to change. I've got a roof over my head, a terrible microphone, and now it's time to chase the algorithm for those big HEMA bucks. This video is going to be a list of books that I feel someone with an interest in historical fencing could benefit from reading. But to put a new spin on an old formula, I'll also include just the lightest touch of textual criticism. First up, we have Roger Krosnier's Fencing with the Foil, Instruction and Technique, which I believe was first published in 1949. At some point in their historical fencing journey, it's worth your time to learn the language and grammar of fencing. For a long time, the recommended literature was the epee coaching book Understanding Fencing by Zbigniew Tchaikovsky. For a historical fencer who wants to learn the difference between a reprise and a remise, or a coulée and a coupé, Krosnier is a better choice. It was written to address the shortage of quality fencing instruction in post-war Britain, and so clearly explains fundamental concepts and ideas. The style is a much easier read than Tchaikovsky. More to the point, it's available. I've picked up second-hand copies in towns from Fungai to Exeter for less than a tenner. It's crisply illustrated and easy to understand. On the downside though, it's an instructional text from the 1940s. It's prescriptive about how actions should be made and performed in a way that doesn't really vibe with modern notions of learning movement. It's also a work of fencing history in itself. The game is constantly evolving with new techniques and metas. Finally, an innocent reader could well fall into the trap of believing that learning the information in the book will make them good at the activity of fencing, which isn't the case. For more on that, check out Book 3 from this list. The second book is Tim Powers' The Drawing of the Dark from 1978. Tim Powers is best known today for writing On Stranger Tides from 1987, which influenced the Monkey Island adventure games and the Pirates of the Caribbean film franchise. His first novel, The Drawing of the Dark, is a piece of historical fiction set in 1529 against the backdrop of the Siege of Vienna. The protagonist is an Irish mercenary, and the novel's use of supernatural and religious figures is reminiscent of later works like American Gods or Susanna Clarke's Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell from 2004. I'm not just recommending the book because it's a fun read, but also because it's set in a period of history that many modern people struggle with. It's not quite the High Middle Ages or modern nation states going to war, but some complicated third thing that's unfamiliar to us. Now, while the author was riding that sweet 70s Dungeons & Dragons wave of fantasy fiction, today it's worth looking at a novel with a critical eye. Has a novel about the titanic clash of civilizations between the Western world and the Middle Eastern cultural threat aged well in a world that suffered from decades of violence perpetuated in the failed global war on terror? Given the endemic issues with fascism in the modern HEMA movement, a novel like this comes with a whiff of the ick about it. Also, the descriptions of fencing hilarious, kinda like The Witches. Our third book is John Bradstock Chow's Making the Cut, Sabre Fencing for Adults, published in 2021. Making the Cut grew out of a series of blog posts on Sydney Sabres Club's website, and was turned into a book during the pandemic. The message of the book is that the game of sabre fencing needs to change how it's organised and practiced, from a sport laser focused on Olympic medals to a sport that adults can take up and enjoy as leisure. Along the way, it explains the theory of modern sabre fencing. But rather than being a textbook of definitions like Krosnier, each chapter is a general concept like parries or binds, introduced with anecdotes and stories of the characters in the modern fencing community. The author's love for the topic and the sport never ceases to shine through. Now, I've never been a sabre fencer. My epee wire brain found fencing with the conventions of priority to be a frustrating experience. But the book does a very good job of explaining how it's done in the modern game and why. The last few sections on using emotion, personal styles and coaching are the most relevant for what we do. You could read the book for the humour alone. If you've ever travelled for a HEMA competition, then the episodes will be very fun. But the strongest part of the book is definitely the last. It recounts how Chow & Co founded Sydney Sabre and moved away from the standard fencing club format, trying to break even financially and get wider participation in the sport. Oh yeah, and it quotes Johnny Lichtenauer's Sacred Scrolls and uses the concepts of Vor and Nachschlag when discussing openings. We gotta return the favour, read Chow's book in exchange. The downside now? Sydney Sabre is based in Australia, and the modern reader has to be prepared to pay for shipping across the globe, which is mind-blowing for folks used to Amazon Prime. Also, the tactical nuances of the modern sport get a bit dry, especially for an audience that is culturally predisposed against understanding the rules of the modern game. The fourth book on our list is by Christopher Duffy, Military Experience in the Age of Reason, from 1987. Now, the very idea of martial arts is marketing, invented in the 1960s. However, it's been so pervasive that folks often come to historical fencing with a preconception of why fencing systems were created and how they were practiced. For example, there's a Reddit post where the poster naively asks for medieval parallels to how modern American gun culture practices safety. Military Experience in the Age of Reason is a military history book, but more than that, it's a social history book. Duffy writes about an age when men lined up in colourful uniforms and blasted away at each other with inaccurate weapons. But he not only asks, why did they think this was a good idea, but also, what was that like to experience? How did such a society work? How did these people learn their trade, and why did they have such a miserable, brutish and boorish existence? It's full of amazing tidbits from memoirs, but the structure is masterfully crafted. Unfortunately, the book has been out of print for a while and can only be found second-hand. Worse still, the author is still very much a military historian, and the characterisation of different nationalities feels a little bit like outright phrenology at times. Still, it's a historical work. A historical fencer is required to read behind the lines at times about the lack of systematic training or education in close quarters combat for soldiers before the Napoleonic Wars. And the last book on our list is César Lacat, Baron de Bazancourt's Secrets of the Sword, first published in French in 1862 and then translated into English by C.F. Clay in 1900. Bazancourt was a stupendous writer and was appointed official historiographer for Emperor Napoleon III. His tale is an excellent read, explaining his fencing philosophy with a framing device, a group of French gentlemen trapped indoors by inclement weather, passing the time by asking an old maestro about his sport. Bazancourt's approach to the sport is of a new school, a sort of proto-épée, contrasted with the old school of traditional French foil fencing. The new school rejects the old fencing conventions in favour of something more applicable in real life. Indeed, a solid chunk of the book's content is about the role of seconds in fencing, where they can honourably intervene in a duel and when they must watch as their friend is in mortal danger. This old school versus new school trope is a reoccurring one in the history of fencing. For example, Harmenberg in his Épée 2. Whatever books talks about playing with old fencers who were used to a convention where the game started in a bind and who had unbeatable blade work but none of the modern distance manipulation game. Now, what's problematic about this text? The main thing is that in HEMA, as a modern movement, people tend to be very attracted to the idea of just playing the game and letting the results themselves sort it out. And that often means divorcing the activity of fencing from the social context in which it was being practiced. It would be extremely easy for a modern historical fencer who doesn't like old conventions of priority and right-of-way and this kind of stuff to pick up this text and take on Bazancourt's message, which was that his scene at the time had become a little bit staid and impractical, and to come away thinking that there's no point learning how old fencing conventions in the past worked. So that's the 5 books I'd recommend to any humorist, and also why I think they're kind of bad. I hope you've enjoyed it. I know that I need to get a better microphone and sort out some of these audio quality issues, but if you'd like to see more content like this, please give this video the old like and subscribe. Thank you very much.